that we all know here in Trinidad and Tobago. There are many defining moments in a person's life. One such critical moment in the life of the author of From Lion to Lamb, Caron Asgarali, was when on the evening of January 29, 2013, the stillness was shattered by gunfire. When the disruption cleared, Caron was covered in blood. A bandit had shot her, damaging her jaw badly. Caron's life as a chemistry teacher in a secondary school was temporarily shattered after the injury to her right shoulder, chest, and jaw. She had to eventually undergo reconstructive and plastic surgery to her jaw where the bullet had passed through. The story of how Caron coped with her tragedy is outlined in this book, From Lion to Lamb. It is interesting and inspiring. On her journey of recovery, Caron had an illumination. She went through a process of self-examination and made a startling revelation that her life could be used to serve her community and posterity better than she had been doing before her traumatic experience of being shot. So the forward goes on some more, but we're going to stop there because we want to hear the story from Caron herself. Well, I think, everybody looking on is going to want to know, okay, well, what's the story? This is not so long ago. 2013 is last year.
Yeah.
So maybe you could give us a little background to what you were doing at the time. You were a teacher.
Yes, at the time this happened, I was teaching. I teach A-level, CSEC, and CAPE chemistry at the San Fernando Central Secondary School, which is also known as ModSec. It was a normal day for me. I went to school, I taught my students, we had labs in school. Afterwards, I did my usual routine, which is to go and look after my dogs and then take an afternoon's jog.
Right.
And late in the evening...
So you live close by to the school?
Yeah, I just live like maybe 5 or 10 minutes away from the school.
And maybe I should ask you if you're married with children, if you have children.
Well, actually, I am a divorcee. I have one son who is 23 years old now.
Okay. So he would have been 22 at the time?
He was 22 at the time, yes.
Okay.
And that evening, a friend of mine called and we went for a drive. And we were coming back, I was heading back home when we were turning from a minor road onto a major road, and we stopped momentarily. And in that moment, in that instant, everything changed. And it's so strange when you look at the television shows or the movies, you hear the change in the music.
Yes.
The change was as apparent as that. And I realized that something was wrong, and when I looked to my left, there was someone standing outside the window, and I realized that something was going to happen. I did not see any weapon or anything, but in the instant I realized that, I tried to protect myself, so I moved, and in moving, I got shot in the jaw and, well, I guess on the chest and the shoulder. And it all happened so very quickly, but in that very instant that I got shot, my friend who was driving the car stepped on the accelerator, and I always say it's a good thing I had the car that I had at the time. The car was able to immediately speed off. There was no puttering. It took off right away. And even as we were getting away, they continued firing at the car. I think that evening there was a bit of a spree, a shooting spree that evening with those bandits, and they were looking for a getaway car, and that's where we came in.
Okay.
And well, when I realized...
Now this was, you say, your car was on a minor road about to get onto the major road.
That's correct.
Was it a busy intersection?
No. It was at night, so it really wasn't that busy, and it was dark, so I couldn't see very well. And at the instant we took off, we drove off, I realized that I had been shot, and there was blood just pouring from my face, and splinters all over, splinters and shrapnel was stuck to my face, and I was so scared when I put my hand to my face because what I was feeling there was just nothing. It felt as though it was ripped away, and it really was. I didn't see it, but that is what had happened. I was very fortunate that there was a police van just about 2 streets it happened. They were actually looking for the people, and I was transferred to the van, which took me to the hospital.
Praise God.
Yeah, when I got to the hospital now, I was really not aware of the extent of the damage. I had lost a lot of blood, and I was very weak when I got there. But although I'm a very quiet person, I'm a very independent person, and when I got there, I walked into the emergency room, and that in itself was a feat. And
So you walked in.
I walked in, and it did stun all the doctors and nurses, and they were like, what is this coming into the room?
Yes.
Because there I was with my face totally blown away, blood all over, and I was walking into the room. All I remember from then is that they put me to lie down, and there was a lot of movement, and I didn't really know what was going on because to me nothing was happening. Of course things were happening, but it just
Yes,
seemed
in
as
your-
though for that
yeah,
time
in your
nothing was
mind.
going on. And at that point they asked to get a number, contact number for someone, and I did not want them to contact any members of my family. I don't know how to explain it, but I didn't want anyone seeing me in the
Oh my
condition
God.
that I was
It's
in.
amazing how the human mind thinks.
Yes,
eh?
it really
But
is.
where was your friend then who was driving the car? to see?
My friend had to remain outside because I was in the emergency room, and they didn't
Yeah.
know I was actually in critical condition. It was touch and go at that point in time, and well, what they finally did, I gave them my brother's phone number, and somehow they did get my son's phone number. So when they tried to call my brother and they didn't get through, they ended up calling my son. I didn't want him
Yes,
being called.
yeah.
But they had no choice. They needed someone to come down to sign all the forms, and you know, you need to let the family know because they didn't know if I
you
was
would-
going to live
yes,
or
yes.
not. And they did eventually contact my son first, but fortunately my son at the time was at university, and he was at St. Augustine. He didn't have a car, so for him to get down, he had to call a taxi. At that time, I don't remember exactly what time it was. He had to call a taxi, and by the time he did get down, my brother had already reached.
Okay,
and
so
I
he
had
was there to kind
he
of
was
give him
there,
strength.
yes, and also my son reached after I had gone up for surgery, so he did not get to see
Yes,
me in that
yeah.
condition, which is really what I didn't want.
Yes.
um,
But I just want to go back
Yes.
a little bit because you know it's not often that you get to speak to somebody who has had this kind of experience.
yes.
But a lot of people say that when something like that happens, I'm going back now to the moment when you were
Yeah.
hit, that everything seems to move in slow motion, that you see things more clearly.
Nobody ever asked me that, but it's very possible that that would have happened because I refer to what you described there, I refer to it as me going into survival mode. Because, you know, what you would imagine if you are shot, you would imagine yourself hysterically screaming and,
Yes.
you know, oh my God, you're getting all in a
Yeah.
state. That didn't happen to me. I just immediately I realized what was going on, and I knew that I had to conserve my energy, and I knew that if I were to fight up too much, I would lose even more blood than I had already lost. I was thinking right through. I was very cohesive in my thinking. But in terms of slowing down, perhaps it did appear that way because to me, that drive to the hospital felt like it could never come to an end.
Yes,
It was
yeah.
so long it seemed to take
And
to
I'm
reach
sure they were
there.
driving at top speed.
I'm sure they were because they put on their siren.
Yeah.
It was really an experience. But I didn't have time to process that part of it. I was really focusing on, you know, what I had to do to try to maintain, to hold on to my life. And you know, one question that a lot of people did ask is, what did I think about, you know, in terms of the vanity aspect? How did I think about how I was going to look? And, you know, that did very briefly enter my mind, but at that point in time,
All you
that
wanted
is
was live.
yes, that was the last thing that I had to worry about.
Yeah, yeah. Now, the name of the book is From Lion to Lamb, A Spiritual Journey. So you want to tell us why you chose that particular name?
Okay, well, I didn't actually choose that name. That name was inspired. That came as a direct instruction that that is what I had to call my book.
Okay.
And it came about even as I was writing a particular section in the book. I don't remember exactly where now. And I was talking about, you know, the changes that I had undergone throughout my life. When, as a teacher, you know, I I consider myself as a lion because I wasn't afraid to stand up for things that I believed in and to stand up for the rights of my students and even myself. And perhaps at times I could come across as, too vociferous or too, I don't want to use the word aggressive because, it paints a very harsh picture, but perhaps that might be the best word to use.
And I suppose that happens when you teach, especially if you're teaching young people, that you have to kind of
keep them in check.
Control.
And so that's how I perceived myself as. And when over the years I gradually mellowed, and what I found when this happened is because of the complete surrender and the peace, the calm that comes from surrender, I think that that's where the Lamb came in. And also the fact that I moved closer to Jesus Christ, who is also called the Lamb of God. So it has like a double meaning to it. And that's where the title came from.
Okay. Now, were you a writer before this? Were you someone who used to write poems or anything at all?
Well, as a teenager, yes. We're all emotional at that stage in our lives. And yes, I did write some poetry at that time. And then later on in my life, when I did the diploma in education, I completed writing a book on clinical supervision in schools. I never got it to publication. And then just around the time this happened, I was working with a group of teachers on writing a chemistry book, actually. And right now I've re-entered into a project on a chemistry book again.
So there is something of a writing
there
side
is something of that there.
So what moved you then to actually feel you needed so soon, because it's only 2013 you had this experience, what moved you to feel that I need to document this or I need to share it with other people?
Well, what had happened for the first 3 weeks after the incident, I was unable to speak. So all my communication with everybody was in writing. And I would write all the time, even when you want to express how you're feeling, whether someone is there or not. I couldn't say it out, so I would write down things. And everybody kept saying, well, you should write a book, you could write a book. And I guess they planted the seed. And when I came out of the hospital, I started writing as therapy. I had a blog, and I would write on my blog and just write about different aspects of the incident. And then I decided, yes, I should write this book, and I started writing. And the book had no meaning. At least that's how I felt about it. I read it, and it was just like, telling this story, but there's nothing more to gain from this story. And you just put it aside. And then about 9 months after the incident, I went through a post-traumatic stress disorder period. And during that time, I had at least 2 revelations. One is where I got the opportunity to spend 5 minutes in the presence of God. Yes, and it did happen.
Tell us about that.
Yes. Well, this was when I went to do the last procedure at that point in time before I could do anything else. This would have been around November. And all it was to remove some bars from my mouth because my jaws had been wired shut. And in removing the bars, I had to undergo anesthetic. It was a light anesthetic, but I still had to have it. And just when they were removing the last of the bars, I got up. And I was fully awake. When they completed removing, well, I did feel a little. I did feel it.
Yeah.
And then the doctor asked me to leave the room for the other patient to come in and go to another room. And in the other room, I walked across. But in the other room, that is when I went through the revelation. I sat on a chair, and they were unable for 25 minutes to get me up. With slapping, with opening my eyes, pinching, and I should have been awake. But I knew what was going on, but they didn't know I knew what was going on. And I had transcended, it seems. And I kept calling out for my God. My Lord is what I kept calling out for. And this is what they were hearing. What they didn't know is that I actually was in that place. And in crying out and asking for him, I was granted. I was told that I was given 5 minutes of time with him, but I would have to go back. And I was told that I have to go back because I was seeing the tunnel that we always hear about. And I knew that if I went through there, that there was no coming back. And I really, really wanted to go through. And the reason why I wanted to go through there is because I realized at that point in time that death was not something to be afraid of. Death was something to be welcomed, because when we die, if we are blessed enough to enter into God's presence, into His kingdom, then what we experience there is pure tranquility and peace forever, for eternity, and to spend that time with Him. And that is what I wanted. I didn't want to come back. But I had no choice. I had to come back. And yes, so that was one of the revelations. And then the other revelation happened around January. I was still now emerging from this depression.
This is 1 year later.
Yes, it would have been just about 1 year later. And coming out of the depression, it happened on a Sunday night. And I got up the Monday morning a different person. I was up to the Sunday night, I was still depressed. Monday morning, I got up with renewed vigor, with purpose, and I started my writing, because that Sunday night I was told that I have to do my story, and I have to tell it, but I have to tell it based on the Beatitudes.
And this came to you in a dream?
Well, I don't know exactly how to put it, but it was revealed, probably is the best way to describe it, but still that is unclear. But it is hearing God's voice.
I think the term sometimes they use is like an inner locution.
Yes, that could probably be it.
Right.
But it's hearing His voice, and it's being able to detect that is God's voice calling, and being able to answer that call, and to not just answer it, but to stick with it, to stay with it. And I did that. I persevered. I did what I had to do, because this is what God directed me to do. And that's where the book came about. And it all happened in less than 2 weeks.
The book, the writing of
yes,
the book.
The writing.
You just felt inspired to write this book.
Yes.
I mean, what an incredible story. What an incredible story. And what are people then going to find in the pages of this book? The story of what actually happened. And then what else you think we want to give them a little insight into?
Yes, they will find the story of what happened, and they will be able to relate to what happened to each one of the different Beatitudes. But I also had to draw from different aspects of my life. I had to draw on my relationship with my father. I had to draw on the reconstructive process. I had to draw on of who I am. I am a teacher.
Yeah.
So I drew experiences from that, and almost every aspect of my life I touched on. So it really is exposing myself to the world.
Yes. Now you talked about you had to draw from the relationship with your father. What was special about that?
Well, I'm my father's only daughter.
Okay.
My father passed away about 5 years ago. He was both a heart patient and a diabetic patient, and he would pray every single day. Once he realized, prayer is what he had to do. And what I found after his death is that he would pray that he wouldn't die from either one of those things, and he didn't. 2 months before he passed away, we found out that he had stage 4 cancer, and he eventually passed from that. When he died, his heart never gave him problems then, and the diabetes was totally under control.
Yes. So he was a man of prayer, a man of faith.
Yes, he was.
And he passed that on to you.
Yes, but I think my mom is as well, and my mom is a woman, a very strong woman of faith.
So it is, suppose the example of the two of them, that without even knowing it, that's what you drew on in that experience.
I think I would have.
Now, physically, you talked about your whole face being blown away. But looking at you today, yes, you can see that mark on your chin, but other than that, I mean, you look perfect.
Well, thank you very much. You're very kind to say that.
No, but it's the truth.
Well, I would say 2 things. The first thing, and it is a major thing, is praise to God for that. Because from where I was to where I am today is two totally different things from where I was when the incident happened.
Right.
And the second thing, which would come way down on the list after God, and this is no disrespect to anyone, but it would be all of my doctors. The doctors at San Fernando General Hospital, and the doctors who did the reconstructive surgery. This would be Dr. Marcus Daniel and Dr. Fayed Mohammed.
And all this was done right here in Trinidad?
Right here in Trinidad, yes.
So how long after you did the first emergency surgery, how many more surgeries you had after that?
I would say in total I underwent about 5 major procedures, but one major one, but about 5 procedures in all. And like that happened in January, and the reconstructive surgery was done in August, the 11th of August.
And how much of this time did you have to spend actually in hospital and not at home?
Only the first 3 weeks, almost a month, I spent in the hospital, and the rest of the time I was home. But being home, not being able to do very much because I was depleted, physically depleted, as well as emotionally, mentally, and every other way. But it really was. And after the surgery, at the time of the surgery, I was down to 88 pounds. So that would give you an idea of how frail I would have been. And then after the surgery, I got even smaller. And it took quite a while before I could recover. I'm still recovering.
Build yourself back up.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, how did you find that your faith grew and matured in that time?
Well, when it first happened, I didn't even think about that. But what would happen, my brother lent me an MP3 player, and at nights for me to sleep. Sleeping was one of the most difficult things.
Because of the fear inside of you?
The fear was one of the things, the injury itself, and the jaw wasn't wired at first. For the first 3 weeks it wasn't. So it was very loose, and here was open. It was covered with bandages, but it was open, and I couldn't close the mouth properly, so I was drooling constantly. And I didn't like being seen like that, because people would think that, you're not cleaning up or tidying up yourself. But the truth is, I couldn't even feel it. I just knew it was happening when people would tell me. And so I constantly mopped up, even if I was drooling or not.
Yes.
And
just to be sure.
So sleeping was difficult, and he lent me this, and I would listen to Don Moen's gospel, and there was one song in particular, Thank You, Lord. And I listened to that over and over and over, and that was what helped me through. And at that point I thought, my faith is getting stronger. And right throughout the months I kept saying, my faith is getting stronger, until I had that revelation. And after that, I had thought when my father passed away that I had submitted completely. But after that, I realized, there's still so much more that I have to give up and submit to God's will. And it has been growing every single day. And there are times, you feel very close to Him. And there are times when I realize, I've allowed myself to slip. I haven't done anything bad, but I just haven't remained as close to Him as I should. And probably this is one of
yourself back.
And as you know, probably this is one of the things that I would like to share with people, that even though I probably never did it throughout my years, and now it's never too late to turn back to God, and what we have to do to remain in His presence and to submit completely to Him. We have to pray all the time. We have to meditate. We have to read His Word, and even more than that. And this last one I only found out like just about 2 weeks ago, is that we have to fast. And fasting can take different forms. I don't want to go into the forms, but we have to do these 4 things regularly, all the time, consistently, in order to remain with God.
Now, there are some people perhaps looking on, or people who would meet you who would say, how can you believe in God when He allowed something like this to happen to you? That's a question we hear all the time, Why do bad things happen to good people?
Yes, well, I never looked at it that way. The way I looked at it is that God stepped in at the very moment that that gun was fired, and he saved my life. That's the way I looked at it. I know you could look at it as he allowed me to go through this bad thing to get closer to him, whichever way you want to look at it. But the ultimate thing is that he was there, and he is there all the time.
And in your heart, you don't have that kind of feeling of, that negative feeling of, God abandoned me, or...
No, I never, honestly, I never felt that. And in terms of, hating anyone or wanting to harbor revenge, no, none of that.
Never came to you?
No.
So where do you think you go from here now after you've written this book? How do you feel that God wants to use you in touching people's lives?
Yes, well, I think this book has a long way to go still in terms of, my view is that it should be an international book, which it probably already is, because I've sold copies online.
Okay, good for you.
Yeah, and the message, it's not selling the book so much, but it's that for the message to get out. And I believe that he'll use me because I've started working on another book in the religious genre as well.
Yeah.
So, and this other book is meditations, like maybe for every week or every day, something like that.
Now, have you gone back to teaching at the same school, or has life changed in that respect?
Life has changed in that respect. I have been unable to return to teaching so far. People see me and they say, oh, but it's just that scar on your face. But it is so much more that if I get into that now, we may be talking till tonight. There's so much more to this that people just don't understand.
Yeah.
So I've been on leave, extended leave, no pay leave, I should add, so that people don't think I'm taking advantage of the system. And what I learned the last time my mom went to drop in my leave is that the person who was sent to replace me this last time, the last person who was sent, was given a letter stating that she was replacing me permanently because I have been deemed medically unfit.
Okay.
For permanent employment.
Yeah, no, theme song.
Yes.
All right, well, I think we're going to have to talk with you again because this has been so interesting, but I'm hearing the music.
Yes.
So if you want to know more about Caron's story, you're going to have to get your own copy of From Lion to Lamb, okay? This is a book that is life-changing, and I think that we all need to read it. Thank you so much, Caron, for being here. Thank you for joining us, and you're going to get your own copy of this book. God bless.